Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. And in this very special video, I'm going to be sharing with you the exact roadmap you can follow to become a successful property investor in 2022, even if you're starting from scratch. Now, there are many ways to make money with property, both simple and complex. I'm going to try and keep this video as simple as possible. But of course, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask them below in the comment section and I'll be answering them all myself. And of course, if at any point throughout this video you feel like you've got some value, you feel like you've learned something new, please drop a like, because it takes me a lot of time to put this presentation and this content together. And so by liking this video, it will only encourage me to do more. Now, one quick disclaimer before we jump into the presentation. I want to make you aware that property is not get rich quick. A lot of the concepts I'm going to be sharing with you in this presentation are timeless principles of wealth creation. And at times they may sound pretty simple, but property is not get rich quick, but it can be get rich for sure. If and only if you're willing to put in the work and play the long-term game. And then also I want to talk about who this training is for. Now, this is for anyone that's completely new to property, but maybe you're hungry, you're motivated, you're a bit entrepreneurial, you just haven't found the right thing you want to jump into, and property is one of those things that you're considering. Secondly, you may already researched a lot about property, you may already be starting out on your journey, but you just lack a bit of direction and clarity on where you're going to go next. And then thirdly, this is for those of you that maybe have already had some success in business, maybe you've got some money saved, you've got a good income, and you want to find out the best way to be investing that money into property. So if that's you, this video is absolutely for you. And ultimately, this is the kind of content I wish I had when I started my property journey and started learning about property at 17 years old. So a bit about me, my name's Tyler Newman. I'm a full-time property entrepreneur. Currently, my focus is property development, and I've got a property development business with my business partner, Rosie, called Newman Rose, where across the country, across the UK, we're building over £15 million worth of luxury property. But I didn't start here. I started many years ago when I was 17 years old, where I attended a free property seminar at the Cumberland Hotel here in London. And on that free seminar, that was the first time I was ever exposed to property. Despite growing up in a family where my family business is a estate agency, I knew very, very little about property, but I knew I wanted to make money. I didn't want to go to university, and that's where I started. Following on from that free seminar, I spent countless hours, a lot of time, a lot of money, continuing to learn about property, making every mistake in the book. And 18 months later, I finally did my first property deal at 18, just turning 19 years old, which is where I bought a 2-bedroom terraced property for £85,000. I spent £20,000 on the refurbishment and sold it 6 months later for £131,000, pocketing myself £26,000 profit, which is more than I was earning as an estate agent at the time. And that's where my property journey really began to take off. So now doing bigger developments, but ultimately there are so many different routes you can go in your property investing journey. Some of you may just want to buy a few properties so you can replace your existing income. Some of you may want to be large portfolio landlords, and some of you may want to move into doing the larger deals and the larger development projects, which is exactly what I decided to do. And so here's what we're going to cover in this video. So the first thing we're going to talk about is building a cash flow business. And this is the first thing anyone needs to do that's starting from scratch. I'm going to show you what the different kind of cash flow businesses are and why it's important that you start a cash flow business. We're then going to look at the transition you'll need to make from being an operator to an owner. And so the importance of owning property and owning assets long term, and how to buy property the right way. And then lastly, for those of you who want to scale up, those of you who want to build a profitable and lucrative property business, we're going to talk about how you can scale by raising private finance, which is where you bring on investors and you start to use other people's money. So we're going to talk about how that works, how you can find investors, and also how you can get investors to agree to work with you. So let's look at why property is so great. Well, one of my favorite quotes is that success leaves clues. And if we look at the Forbes list, we can see that real estate is responsible for creating 10% of the world's billionaires. And the other 90%, I'm sure, are investing a lot of the money in real estate. But for 10% of the world billionaires, real estate was the primary factor in those people creating their wealth. And if we look at when property prices were first documented in the Doomsday Book in 1086, we can actually see that property prices in the UK has doubled every 10 years at worst on average. Also, property pays you twice, unlike various other asset classes. So when you own property, you get paid one from the rental income, but you also benefit from the capital appreciation, which refers to the prices of property going up in value over time. And then one of my favorite reasons is that it has low barriers to entry, because to become a property investor, to become a property entrepreneur, you don't need a license, you don't need a degree, you don't need any qualifications of any kind, meaning anyone can do it, including you watching this at home. So let's talk about the first step you need to make as a property investor starting from scratch. So the first thing you need to do is build a cash flow business. And the reason we need to do this is because working as an employee, where we're trading our time for money, our income is not scalable, because the only way you can earn more money is by working longer hours, which unfortunately there's only so many hours in the day, there's so many weeks in a month, and there's so many months in a year, or you get a promotion, which of course is not always possible to do straight away, and it means you're competing with a lot of other people. And so what we need is a business that can generate revenue that's not dependent on how many hours we work. It can be having an e-commerce business, it can be having a coaching business or an agency business, it could be working as a self-employed estate agent or in sales, where you're paid purely on how much commission you can generate. But in terms of property, there are two primary cash flow businesses you may have heard about, and those are deal packaging, which is sourcing property deals and then selling these deals onto other investors for a sourcing fee, and then also rent to rent, which refers to renting a property from a landlord and operating as a house of multiple occupation, which is a HMO, and where you rent out on a room by room basis, or as serviced accommodation, which means renting out on sites like Airbnb or Booking.com, where it's rented out on a night by night basis. And this revenue you generate by operating it as a HMO or serviced accommodation. You then pay the rent and you keep the difference in between. Of course, you can have some costs, but after those costs is your profit. And this is no different to how some of the biggest hotels across some of the biggest cities in the world operate. A lot of the hotels you stay in these big cities, they don't actually own the building they're operating in. They don't own the freehold, they just have the leasehold. And so they pay to lease the building, they run it as a hotel, they generate their revenue, they have their costs, their staff, their admin, etc. And then they pay the lease, and then what they have left over is their profit. And so rent to rent is just doing that on a smaller scale. And this can be very lucrative for a lot of people. For example, I've got my friend Bradley, who makes over £20,000 a month profit with his serviced accommodation business, and there's many more people across the UK doing the same. So the strategy I want to talk about in this video is deal packaging. Like I say, deal packaging is where you go out, you find and secure property deals, you then package them up and sell them onto other investors who want to buy that property for a sourcing fee. And this sourcing fee can be £2,000, £3,000 or £5,000 or more, depending on the size of the deal and how good of a deal it really is. We're going to talk about how to find these deals shortly, but in terms of the people we're selling these deals to, we need to find investors that are cash rich and time poor, because you, as someone going out sourcing these deals, you might be cash poor but time rich, and so you're willing to put in the time to learn how to find these deals and go out and actually find them. And so once you've found these deals, you've got these investors that have got the money but they don't have the time. Think business owners, doctors, lawyers who may only have some time off one day a week or in the evenings. They'd rather just pay somebody like yourself a sourcing fee to go out, save them the time to find the deal for them. Again, a little bit later on this video, we're going to talk about how to actually find investors and get these investors to agree to work with you. So hopefully you understand the concept of deal packaging, and a little bit later in the video, we'll learn how to actually find these investors. But now I want to show you some math, because most people don't understand how possible it is to make £100,000 per year with this strategy. So let's reverse engineer making £100,000 with deal packaging. So with deal packaging, you should be charging at least £2,000 to £3,000 sourcing fee for every property deal you find. Now, finding just one deal per week at £2,000 is £8,000 per month and £96,000 per year. So when you set up and run a deal packaging business the right way, it's almost effortless to find this many deals and generate £100,000 per year. And to make £100,000 a year in a job takes qualifications, decades of work experience, and slave-like hours. Even then, most people never even get close to earning £100,000 in a year. With these strategies, earning £100,000 per year should be a hygiene standard. However, it's important to know that with a cash flow business and with these strategies, the income is not entirely passive. It's still active income that we have to go out and work for and invest our time and energy, but it's not directly proportional to the time that we we put in. We're not directly selling our time for money. We're setting up a business, we're setting up systems, we're setting up a team that can generate us revenue, but it still requires some management and some input from our side. And this is because when you're working as a deal packager or have a rent-to-rent business or any other sort of cash flow business, unless you actually own assets, you're going to struggle to get wealthy over the long term, which leads us on to step 2. And step 2 is where we transition from being an operator to an owner. Because with our cash flow business, we don't own the property, we don't own the assets. And in order for us to win the long-term game, we must own the property. Because when we own the property, we benefit from the capital appreciation, which is the prices going up in value over time. And then also the cash flow, which is the rental income paid by the tenants every single month, becomes passive. And so the first lesson I want to introduce you to is the difference between income and wealth. So income refers to earning money, whereas wealth refers to having money. Now, income is a primary piece of wealth creation, but income itself is not wealth. And many studies have shown that the correlation between income and net worth, which is wealth, is actually very weak. So earning money is only part of the equation. What you do with the money has a profound impact on your wealth. Think of income like water flowing through a hose. The greater your income, the larger the flow of water. But wealth is like a bucket that you're filling with the water. Now, the bigger the hose you can fill it with, the more wealth you can build. And if you have a high flow of water, but you're spilling it all on the ground, you're not going to fill the bucket, meaning you're not going to get wealthy. On the other hand, even a trickle of water can fill a bucket over time. And I hope this point proves that wealth is actually created by owning assets. So even if step 1, you have a great cash flow business, you're generating a high income, you're not directly trading your time for money as an employee, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get wealthy over the long run. And so think of all of the world's billionaires, people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. They became wealthy and their net worth accumulated because of the value of the asset that they owned, the asset being the company that they built and their shares and their equity in that company. They didn't become billionaires through the income and the dividends and the salary that they paid themselves. And so this is why it's important to buy property and actually own the asset. However, here's where most people go wrong. They tirelessly work in a 9-to-5 for years and years as an employee, trading their time for money. Over time, they can save up tens of thousands of pounds, only to then blindly buy their first investment property that cash flows them only a few £100 profit every single month. And what I mean by that is going out, buying a property with no sort of care for the ROI, no sort of care for getting it for the best price. They just do nothing to it and rent it out. So think of a vanilla buy-to-let property. The problem with this is that the cash flow isn't enough to change their life, so they continue to save up and up until they can buy another one and another one and another one. However, this whole time they're still working their 9-to-5 because the income from the properties still isn't enough to quit their job. And by the time they have created enough passive income to escape their job, many years or realistically even decades have passed and they have wasted a significant amount of their life. And so here's how we buy property the right way. So the first thing we want to try and do is buy properties below market value, or BMV for short. So buying below market value allows you to create equity in the deal from day one, which has further benefits, meaning you can shrink your deposit, you can put less money in and make your money go further, but it also increases your ROI. You also want to be buying properties where you can add value to them. So adding value to a property, for example, by refurbishing it, creates more equity in the deal, which means you can refinance, allowing you to recycle your cash into another property. Refinance meaning you take out a new mortgage at the new value after you've refurbished it, meaning you can pull out and release some of your equity, and that you can then roll into another deal. Rather than having to go back to work, keep saving up more money to put into the next deal, you can just recycle the equity you've created in the previous property. So that brings us on to the next question, which is how do we find these property deals? Well, there are two ways to find property deals, and that's one, through estate agents. And this is where we build good relationships with estate agents. So they know we're in the market, they know us as a buyer, we're top of their mind. So when a potential property deal comes up, they call us first, we can go in and we can view the property, hopefully before it gets advertised online, or we can use online portals like Rightmove or Zoopla to find these potential deals as well. And I'm going to show you one way we can do that. So here I am on Rightmove and I'm going to search for properties in Doncaster. Now I'm going to search for houses with a minimum price range of 100,000 and a maximum of 150,000 for this example. I'm going to click find properties, and then the tool I'm going to use is this keyword tool here. So there are many different keywords we can search for. One of the examples I like to use is the keyword modernization. So I'm going to search for modernization, and what this is going to do is going to prioritize any properties with the word modernization in the description. Most likely properties that say in need of modernization, meaning there's an opportunity for us to add value. So scrolling through here, we can see there are some properties. I'm going to click into this example here. This is on Kings Road in Mexborough, and we can see in the description it says here in need of modernization. And just by looking at the properties, we can see it's very dated. It's got old carpets in there. It's got old wallpaper. It's got an old kitchen. So there's a lot of potential for us to come in here, refurbish the property, add value, create an uplift in value, which we can then refinance and rent out and retain, or we can sell it on for a profit. And so this is just one of the ways we can use agents and online portals to find potential property deals more quickly and more efficiently. And so the second way to find property deals is with direct-to-vendor marketing. And this means marketing directly to homeowners to advertise the fact we will be interested in buying their property if they are thinking of selling. Now, there are many ways we can do direct-to-vendor marketing. It could be putting signs across your van or on your car that you're looking to buy properties. It could be putting signs up outside the existing properties that you own. It could be writing handwritten letters and delivering them through letterboxes. But one of my favorite ways is with direct-to-vendor leaflets. Now, one of the best ways to do this is using a tool called Canva, and this is a free design tool where we can very quickly mock up a design of a leaflet that we can send out. Now, ideally, we're trying to attract what we call motivated sellers. Motivated meaning they have a reason to sell their property quickly and ideally at a discount. And there are three primary reasons why somebody would do this, and we call these the 3 Ds. One of the first reasons is because of debt. And so homeowners that can no longer afford their mortgage payments and they're behind on their mortgage payments, they're at risk of being repossessed by the banks if they don't sell their property soon. Now, if they get repossessed, they lose everything. And so these people are prepared to sell their property quickly and conveniently with certainty that the deal is going to go through, but they're happy to also sell it at a discount because they'd rather get something than nothing and get repossessed. The second reason is because of divorce. So homeowners that are getting divorced, often they need to sell the property because they can't afford to own the property just by themselves. So they're getting divorced, the property gets sold, and they split the proceeds in accordance with the divorce settlement. And also, a lot of the time, divorces can be a little bit toxic, they can be a little bit messy, and sometimes they just want to move on with their lives, and so meaning selling the property that has, of course, all of the memories of their past. And then thirdly is death. Now, this may sound a little bit morbid, but hear me out on this one. So properties that have been inherited from somebody that have died, the beneficiaries often cannot afford to hold on to the property, or they want to sell it quickly due to the emotional connection. So just to elaborate on that, if somebody's inherited a property, first of all, they might not even live near the property. The property might be 100 miles away and they need to go in and check in on the property and collect the post, make sure the garden's up to scratch, making sure the property's safe and sound and it's not been broken into, etc. And then also, if the property's in poor condition, which of course a lot of properties where someone has died of old age, the properties can be quite dated. Sometimes the beneficiaries and the people that have inherited the property can't afford to refurbish it to a standard where the property can be rented out, and so they're forced to sell it. And then lastly, like I say, the emotional connection side of things. People need a lot of time for bereavement and the mourning process, and sometimes selling the property allows them to move on with their lives and remove that emotional connection with their relative that has unfortunately passed away. Now, before we go any further, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. These people that are in debt or going through a divorce or have recently had a relative pass away, these people are vulnerable and they're in a situation where they need help. And so I want to make it absolutely clear that our goal when working with these people is not to take advantage of their situation. So let's look at the example of somebody that's in debt and on the brink of repossession. We're providing a win-win scenario to this person because if they don't sell their property soon, they're going to get repossessed. And so what we're offering them is a speedy transaction, a convenient transaction, and also certainty that we're not going to mess them around. Although in order to do this, we may want to be buying their property at a discount and below market value. On the flip side, they could go put the property on the market with an estate agent. It might take them really long to find a buyer. That buyer may take a really long time for the transaction to go through, and there is a risk the buyer could put out. So in the seller's mind, it's a more sensible option to sell the property at a discount, however, have the certainty and the convenience of a deal going through quickly, rather than the risk of being messed around trying to get a better price, but at the risk that they may still get repossessed if a buyer messes them around and pulls out further down the line. And then finally, I want to talk about step 3, which is raising private finance. And this is where we look at working with private investors, or what we call other people's money, to help us grow our property business. And this is for those of you that really want to scale to the next level and build a hugely successful property business and maybe make this a full-time thing. And the reason we need to look at using other people's money is because using our own money is a finite resource. There's only so much money we have personally, and so if we rely on using our own cash, everything's going to take so much longer, and we're going to be restricted with the amount and the size of deals that we can do. Now, this may be something you only want to do after you've done 1 or 2 deals, after you've built up a bit of a track record, after you've got some confidence in your own ability, or this might be something you want to do straight away and jump in with both feet, start raising money from investors to fund your first property deal. And this is ultimately the #1 skill of the biggest property investors, property developers, and property companies across the world. For example, the investment company Blackstone, as of recording right now, they have a property portfolio of $448 billion. And they've managed to achieve this because they've raised over $230 billion from private investors. Or even some of the most well-known developments in London, like One Hyde Park, built by the Candy brothers. Even on the Wikipedia page of this property, it says this was a joint venture between the Candy brothers and a billionaire politician from Qatar. Or even more well-known, Donald Trump, who was famous for saying,
"It has not been easy for me. And, you know, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
Now, I've raised over 7 figures from private investors at this point to help fund my own property deals that I'm working on, because there's no way I'd be able to do these deals if I was relying on my own cash, and really nor would I want to. But by partnering with other investors that want to come in on the project, it's a win-win situation for me, and it's a win-win situation for the investor, because they're getting a return on their money, and I'm able to get into the bigger deals that I otherwise wouldn't be. Now, there are many different ways to structure deals with investors, and I want to keep this video simple. So instead of me diving into this topic for hours and hours, talking about the details around all the different investment structures, the compliance, and all of the FCA regulations you need to follow, make sure you subscribe to when I do a video on this topic in the future. You can catch that. But I want to keep this super simple. And right now, more than ever, there is more money sitting in people's bank accounts, losing value because of inflation, that people aren't able to invest because they don't know how to invest, or they don't know where to invest. But the first point I want to make is that there is no lack of money out there, because a lot of people say, oh, there are no investors that want to invest in my deals. But just last year, thisismoney.co.uk posted an article saying there is now over £1.7 trillion sitting in people's savings accounts across the UK, with the best fixed rate savings account paying only 0.9% interest. With inflation as high as it is right now, that money in those savings accounts are losing value, and these people want to invest their money. The trouble is they don't know how to invest it, and they don't know where to invest it. And so there is plenty of money out there are plenty of investors out there, and it's these people we need to be partnering with and forming relationships with and raising money from in order to help us fund our future property interests. So point being, there is more than enough money and investors out there. The only problem is these people don't know how to invest their money, and they don't know where to invest their money. And so these are the people we need to be partnering with, we need to be raising finance from, and so we can create win-win situations with them. So there are 2 ways you can use other people's money that I want to talk about in this video. The first is using private loans. And this is where private investors loan you money in the form of private debt. Debt being there is an agreed amount of money that's going to be paid back over an agreed amount of time with an agreed amount of interest. For example, someone loaning me £20,000 at 10% interest over a 2-year term. That means I'm going to pay them back the £20,000 plus the interest at the end of the term. Now, this debt can be used towards funding a rent-to-rent deal or a service accommodation deal, where simply if you need £5,000 or £3,000 to do your first deal, you can find someone that's willing to loan you that money, you agree an interest rate to pay them, and then you pay them back at the end of the term, whether that's 6 months or 12 months, with whatever interest you agree. It could also be to fund a refurbishment project. So let's say you've got enough money for the deposit to purchase a property, but you need a further £20,000 to fund the refurb. You can raise that £20,000 in the form of debt from an investor, and you can say, I'm going to pay this money back at the end of 6 months with a 10% interest. For example, let's say you have enough money for the deposit to purchase a property, but need to borrow a further £20,000 for the refurbishment, you can raise that money as debt from an investor, and you can agree with that investor you're going to pay back the £20,000 plus interest after you've sold the property. And then lastly, you can use debt to fund an entire property purchase. So for example, you found a property that's maybe worth £120,000, you've agreed to buy it for £100,000, you could find an investor that could loan you that full £100,000, and they take a charge on that property just like a mortgage lender. So essentially they're just acting as a private mortgage. And the second simple way is with a joint venture. So this is where you partner with an investor for a project. You come in, you find a deal, you manage the deal, you do all of the operations. The investor will fund the deal, and then the profits are split 50-50. So in this example, you're both bringing equal value to the table. You're doing all of the work, you're finding the deal, you're managing the deal, you're making the profit. The investor's putting the money in, he's taking on the risk with you, and then you split the profits in accordance with your partnership agreement, which a lot of the time is going to be a 50-50 split. And then the biggest question that pops up is, well, how do you find these investors? And importantly, how do you get the investors to agree to work with you? And so there are three key principles I want to share with you. One is that you need to learn how to find great deals. And this is something we looked at earlier on with direct to vendor marketing and using estate agents, because when you find great deals, the money will find you. And the example I want to give you is, imagine you saw a Ferrari advertised for sale down the road from you for £50,000. And you know this Ferrari, the condition it's in, the model, the age of the Ferrari. On the open market, if you were to put it on Auto Trader, you could sell it for £100,000. Do you think you'd be able to round up enough people to put the money in to find the 50,000 so you can then flip it the next day for £100,000 and double your money overnight? Well, because it's such a great deal, yes, you'd probably have to speak to a few people, but if you spoke to enough people, you'd eventually get enough people to agree to it, even if they didn't even know who you are, just because it's such a good deal. And then the second thing you want to be doing is build an audience. So you want to be using social media to build an audience by documenting your knowledge, educating them, telling your story, and eventually this audience will begin to know, like, and trust you. And this is an advantage we have in this generation that previous generations of property entrepreneurs didn't have. We can quickly go on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube from our phone, and we can get in front of thousands of people. We can create one piece of content, one video that can be watched thousands and thousands of times. That's the power of social media. And the crazy thing is, when people spend enough time following you on social media and seeing your content, they begin to build a bit of a rapport, a bit of a relationship, and like I say, they begin to know, like, and trust you. An example of this is, think of when Robin Williams passed away, the famous actor, comedian. When he passed away, a lot of people were sad, upset, despite never meeting him before. But they'd watched enough of his content, they'd watched him on TV, they feel like they had a relationship with him. So when he passed away, it caused an emotional response. The same with Kobe Bryant. A lot of people had never met Kobe Bryant, but when he passed away, because they spent so much time watching him on TV, watching his interviews, they felt like they'd built a relationship with him and they began to know, like, and trust him. So when he passed away, again, it caused this emotional response. Point being is, use social media to create an audience of people that warm to you, that like you, that trust you. So when you do have a deal, you can promote this audience and they feel like they can trust you and invest in your project. And then finally, you want to get educated and know your numbers. Otherwise, investors, they're going to see the holes in your knowledge and they won't have the confidence to invest in you. A lot of the times I get on calls with investors and they'll ask me really pressing questions that actually is nothing to do with a deal, but they just want to make sure, have I got the knowledge and do I understand what I'm talking about, so they can figure out, do they have the confidence to invest in me or not. And so I want to use the example of Dragon's Den. We've all seen Dragon's Den, we all understand what it is. However, I want you to think about all of the business owners that go on Dragon's Den to pitch for the investment they need. Of course, not everyone gets an investment from the Dragons, and I want you to think, why is that? Well, it's definitely not because there is a lack of money and a lack of investors available, because the investors are there, they've got the money. A lot of the time it comes down to many different factors, such as the business owner doesn't know the numbers and they kind of embarrass themselves, and the investors and the Dragons lose confidence in them. It's either not a good deal or it's not a great deal. It's not an irresistible proposition, which in the context of property, like we talked about in point one, find great deals and the money will find you. If you don't have a great deal, many investors may have the money to invest, but they may not want to invest invest in that deal. And then the third reason the dragons don't invest is because they don't like the business owner. And this is because maybe the business owner was a bit argumentative, he didn't want to answer the questions properly, or just wasn't educated. So hopefully this proves my point around the importance of having a great deal and an irresistible opportunity, having an audience that know, like, and trust you, and being educated and knowing your numbers. So when it comes to presenting the deal to investors, you can present with confidence, and the investor can have confidence that you're someone they should be investing in. So hopefully you've understood all of that, and it's giving you a lot more clarity and direction on where you need to go now. Whether you're starting completely from scratch, maybe you've already started learning about property, or maybe you've even got a few deals under your belt. What I want to do now is invite you to book a call with my team. Below this video in the description, you're going to see a link to check out my training program, Property Investing Blueprint. Now, this program is for anyone that wants to build a hyper successful property investing business. You want to learn how to source amazing deals. You want to learn how to systemize your business. You want to learn how to attract investors, raise finance effortlessly at scale and also compliantly, and also learn about the mindset, the routines, and the discipline required to build a hyper successful property business. Now, at the bottom of the page, you're going to see an opportunity to fill out a short survey and book in a call with my team. Now, this is not a sales call. The purpose of this call is to get clarity on exactly where you are right now, and for us to also get clarity on where you want to be. Together, we'll then work on an actionable roadmap to help you fill in the gaps and give you more clarity on how you can get there, and decide if we think you're a good fit for us and if we're a good fit for you. And if we feel like we can help you, we'll give you all the information you need to get started, including the investment required to enroll, and we can get you started on your property journey. That's all for this video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you book in a call with my team, drop a comment, drop a like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.